All right, you guys, here we are. Another flex day. Today we're going to be working on Unit 5 LT3 notes, solving quadratics by graphing. Okay, so you should have your note sheet up here, and it says x-intercepts. The x-intercept is where it crosses the x-axis, and the y value is 0. And I'm going to show you on, as we work, how you find those. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So if you remember right, we always do the opposite b divided by 2 times a to be able to find our first x value. So if I were to plug this in, I'm going to say x equals, remember my a comes with my squared value, so my a is a 1. My b comes with my x value, so that's going to be a 4. And my c is all by itself. It doesn't have a letter on it, so that's going to be a 3. So if I'm going to do the opposite of b, right now b is 4, so it's going to be a negative 4 divided by 2 times my a value. Oops, I'm not sure what happened there. Somehow I got a picture in a picture, but let's just go with it. 2 times my a value. Right now my a is a 1, so I'm going to say, 2 times, what the heck? 2 times 1. Okay, so negative 4 is still going to stay a negative 4 on top. 2 times 1 is a 2. Negative 4 divided by 2 is going to give me a negative 2. Remember, we put that negative 2 right in the center. So in the middle, I'm going to put that negative 2, and then I'm going to think of what's above it and what's below it. So negative 1 and 0, and then negative 3 and negative 4. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and with this negative 2, I'm going to stick that negative 2 anywhere it has that x. So I'm going to start there. So to find our y value, we're just going to say y equals, and since there's no number in front of the x, I'm just going to start with a parenthesis and put that negative 2 in parentheses. Anytime you have that x value, it has to be in parentheses. Then I'm going to square it outside the parentheses, plus 4, and stick that negative 2 in, and then plus 3. So I'm just following all of this up at the top. I'm following that, and I'm just plugging in that negative 2. So normally you guys are always borrowing calculators from us, which is fine. But for today, we're going to go ahead and use Desmos because we don't have calculators available to hand out to you. So I'm just going to plug that in. So when I'm using Desmos, I'm going to start with a parenthesis and get my negative 2. My negative and my subtraction are the same on Desmos. And then I'm just going to type it all in. Oops, except I'm not typing it in right. So let me try that again. Plus, my fingers are not so tiny on my screen here. Negative 2. Nope, that's not a 2. Close it, plus 3. Okay, so on the other side of my negative 2, because I had a negative 2 in there, I'm going to put a 1 on my y value, and not just a 1, a negative 1. So I'm going to stick a negative 1 there. Now remember that this makes that rainbow thing. So these two match up, and these two match up. So I'm just going to pick one of them. Because the negative 3 and negative 4 are both negatives, and I won't have to get rid of my negative, I'm just going to go ahead and into Desmos, and I'm going to change that negative 2 to a negative 3. On both spots. Okay, so that's going to be a 0. So now I know that I'm going to have a 0 right here and a 0 right here because I stuck that negative 3 and then those will both be the same. Now I'm going to change that negative 3 to a negative 4. And I get a 3. So now I have a 3 here and a 3 here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of Desmos for a little bit so you can see this on the graph. So now we're going to go ahead and graph this. Okay, so I'm just going to start at the top. So I'm going to say 0, 3. So I'm going to start at 0. Let me get a different color here. So I'm going to start at 0, and then I'm going to go up to 3. Remember, first I find my hallway, so I'm going left or right, and then I go up or down. Because it's a 0, I'm not going left and right at all. I'm staying on that 0 line. I'm going up to 3. Now I'm going to go left, negative 1, and I'm not going anywhere from negative 1. It's staying on 0. And then negative 2, and then negative 1. So left 2, down 1, negative 3, 0. So I'm staying on negative 3, not going up or down. and then negative 4, 3. So negative 4, 3 is right there. Whoops, that's 4. Got a little bit high there. There you go, that looks better. And you know that this is going to make that U shape like that. So if it's making that U shape, that looks good. What we're learning today is how to find our x-intercepts. Well, our x-intercepts is where they land on that x-axis. And that's always going to be when my y is a 0, that's where my x-intercepts are. So if I look at my graph, I can figure it out one of two ways. So when I'm looking at my graph, I can look right here and see how that y is a 0, so my x is a negative 1. And right here, my y is a 0 and my x is a negative 3. So I can see it right there, but I can also see where it lands right there and right there. And those got kind of big. But see how that x-axis is on an exact number, and it is exactly hitting that number. So it's not going up and it's not going down, it's just staying on there. So then we're on this line where it says x-intercepts, I can say x equals, and then put the two numbers, negative 1, comma, x equals negative 3. Okay, so let's try that again. So we're going to do the same thing with this one. First, we're going to find our A, B, and our C. So I'm going to say A equals 0.5. B equals 2, and C equals 3. Okay, then I'm going to do x equals opposite B divided by 2 times my A value. So x equals opposite of B. So right now it's a positive 2, so it's going to be a negative 2. Divided by 2 is always there, and my A value is a 0.5. And then I'm going to stick that in Desmos. So if I have Desmos come up here, and I'm just going to put that in. So I can get my top and my bottom using my division bar. If I do a negative 2, and then parentheses, 2, parentheses, 0.5, and close it. Okay, and it gives me a negative 2. So this is going to be a negative 2. So remember that negative 2 is going to go in the middle. So I'm going to put a negative 2 there. And then I go above and below. So negative 1, 0, negative 3, negative 4. Now I'm going to go ahead and stick that negative 2 in right here and right here where those x's are, because that's an x value I just found. So I'm going to say y equals, and it's a 0.5 on the outside, so I'm going to keep that 0.5, parenthesis, negative 2 squared plus 2, parenthesis, negative 2, close it, plus 3. Okay, and then I'm going to get Desmos again. And I'm just going to stick all of that in there. Okay, so I'm going to start with a 0.5, parenthesis, stick my negative 2 in there, close it, plus 2, put a negative 2 back in there again, whoops, then plus 3. I just realized I made a mistake, so I forgot to square that after that negative 2. Notice it has to be squared, so I can just tap over there and stick that in. So I still have 0.5, negative 2 squared plus 2 times negative 2 plus 3. So that all looks good, and I get a 1. So I know on the other side of that negative 2 is going to be a 1. And then these two match up, and these two match up. Because I already have that negative, I'm going to choose my negative 3 so I don't have to worry about trying to get rid of a negative. So I'm going to say a negative 3 right here and a negative 3 right here. And I get 1.5. And it's okay that we're getting decimal numbers. So this one's a 1.5 and this one's a 1.5. Okay, and now I'm going to stick in my negative 4. So I'm going to change that to a 4 and change this one to a 4. And I get a 3. Okay, before we were able to find our x-intercepts pretty easily because one of our y values was a 0. Well, if you look at our y values right now, there isn't a single one that is a 0. And that's how you can easily tell where it is. But we can graph it and kind of make our best guess on where those y values would be. Okay, remember your y has to be a 0 in order to find your x-intercept. So I have one of my x's as a 0. That's not the same. Only your y can be a 0, and then you figure out what your x is. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and graph these. So 0, 3, so I'm going to stay on 0. I'm going to go up to 3. Okay, negative 1, 1.5. So negative 1 is here. 1.5 is going to be right in between 1 and 2. So I'm going to stick that right there. Negative 2, 1. So I'll go negative 2, and now go up to 1. And negative 3, 1.5. So negative 3, and I'm going to go 1.5. And negative 4, 3. So negative 4, and then go up to 3. Okay, this right here is my parabola. Okay, is that crossing this line at all right here? Well, no, it's not. So when that happens, you're just going to say, when you say x-intercepts, you can just say, whoops, that's not a, you're just going to say none. Okay, so that the bottom point right here will never, ever cross that x-axis. So when it doesn't cross, you're just going to say none. Kind of see that. I'm going to go back. We can kind of see that too, that none of our y-intercepts cross that line, right? We don't have a 0 right there, so we could see that. There are going to be times, and we'll do those in a minute, where you have to kind of guess what they're going to be, and we could do that. All right, so let's try another one. We're going to start always the same. So our A equals 1. Our B equals 4, and our C equals a 4 also, okay? X equals opposite B divided by 2 times my A value. So X equals, right now my B is a 4, so it's going to be a negative 4, divided by 2 times my A value. Negative 4 divided by 2 is going to give me a negative 2. Gosh, we're getting a whole lot of negative 2's. Not getting very creative here. Negative 2, negative 1, 0. Negative 3, negative 4. You won't always get that negative 2. We're just happen to be that we're getting the same thing every time, this time around. Okay, now I'm going to stick that negative 2 right where this x value is. So I'm going to say y equals, and because it starts with an x, I'm going to use my parentheses and put that negative 2 squared plus 4, negative 2 plus 4. And then you're going to pull up Desmos. On Desmos, if you don't have that, you're going to want to get that. That's in the self-service. So if you don't have it, you can download that in self-service. So I'm going to do negative 2, parentheses, squared, plus 4, parentheses, negative 2 again in the middle, and then plus 4. And I get 0. So I'm going to move this over just a little bit, and I get a 0 that goes right here. Okay, and if you remember, we're going to make this little rainbow like this, and a rainbow like that one right there. Okay, so because it's a negative, I'm going to go ahead and put a negative 3 here and a negative 3 here. Okay, and I get a 1. So across from that, this one I'm going to put a 1, that one I'm going to put a 1, and then I'm going to make that a 4. So negative 4 and negative 4. Oops, there we go. And I get a 4. Okay, remember we're always looking at our x value, or sorry, our y value. We're looking at our y value to see if any of those are a 0. If it is, that's going to be our x-intercept. So when I look at this, this one is a 0. That means that it's going to be crossing there at a negative 2. Okay, so let's just see if this is correct. Let's put this into play. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start 0 and then go up to 4. So I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go up to 4 and then negative 1 and up to 1. Okay, negative 2, and I'm not going anywhere. Okay, so that one's just sitting right there. So does that cross that line? Sure does. Or does that sit on that line? Yes, it does. Negative 3, 1, and negative 4, 4. Am I going up a little too high? There we go. Okay, this makes that beautiful U shape that we want when we're doing a parabola. And because this one is sitting right on that line, we're going to say x equals, and it's on negative 2. And again, you can also find that right there because this one is a 0. And that's only one. Sometimes you might find that there's only one. Sometimes there's going to be none. Sometimes there's going to be two. You should never have more than two. So it's either going to be 0, 1, or 2. Okay, and we can do the same thing in word problems. So word problems, you shouldn't really be worried too much about word problems because this one says the equation y equals negative x squared plus 4x plus 3. So this is what you're used to just seeing, but not in word problem. But we're going to use that and fill in the chart and the graph just like we normally would. Okay, so that represents the height of y of a flying disc x seconds after it is tossed. When will it return to the ground? Okay, so we're going to use that to answer this question. Okay, so we're going to start the same. So A equals, well, out front is a -1, B equals 4, and C equals 3. Okay, so X equals opposite B divided by 2 times A, and you don't have to keep writing this down if you already know that, that's fine. So my opposite of my B, right now B is a 4, so I'm going to say a -4, divided by 2 times my A value, which is a -1. So that's going to be a -4 divided by a -2. Negative and negative turn into a positive, so this is going to be a 2. So I'm going to put a 2 there. I'm going to go above it, and I'm going to go below it. So 1, 0, and then 3 and 4. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and stick that 2 right here, and I'm going to put that 2 right there. So y equals, if that negative is on the outside, you have to have that -1 on the outside. So you can't just start with your parentheses because we have that negative before we would put our parentheses. Okay, so now I'm going to put a 2 in here, squared plus 4, 2 plus 3. Okay, then I'm going to pull out Desmos and go ahead and put that in. So -1 goes out front. Start your parenthesis. Put my 2 on the inside. Square it. Plus 4. Put your 2 back in there. And then plus 3. Okay, and I get a 7. So across from that 2, I'm going to put a 7. And then we're going to do that rainbow thing here and this rainbow thing right there. Okay, so I'm going to change that 2 to a 3. Oops. And I get a 6, 6, and 6. And change that 3 to a 0. And I get a 3. Okay, so now that we have that, okay, so really what we're looking for is for one of these to be a 0, okay? None of those are a 0, and I told you we would kind of get into that. It's kind of unfortunate that it's the word problem one that we're going to be doing it, but, you know, we'll change that for future classes, that it's not the word problem. But let's go ahead and graph this, and then I'm going to explain it after it's already graphed. So if we're at 0 and going up to 3, whoops, that's a highlighter. Don't want a highlighter, so let me get rid of that. So I'm going to go 0, and I'm at a positive 3, and then 1 and 6, and 2 and 7, and 3 and 6. So 3. Whoops, I'm totally off here. Let's try this again. So 1 and 6. There we go. 2 and 7, 3 and 6, and 4 and 3. Okay, so this does make that nice U shape that we like, okay? But if you notice, we need that U shape to cross this line right here, okay? That one is not crossing that line currently, but because those are legs and those legs can keep going, it's not like the point. This point won't go any higher. That's as high as that point will be. But those legs, if you were to keep drawing them, I would come down like this, and I would come down kind of like this. So I'm just kind of going to guess where it would cross. And I'm going to put a little dot, so it's kind of crossing right here, and it's kind of crossing right there. And this is not an exact science, but if you were going to answer this, you would say between, and when I look, it's between, if I'm looking at this, it's between -1 and -2. Okay, and it's going to be between these ones, which is going to be between 3 and 4. Okay, well, if this is talking about seconds and it's asking when will it return to the ground, well, we're going to use this as our ground. So this little bottom piece right here, this is our ground level. Okay, when will it return to the ground? Between -1 and -2, that's talking about seconds. So if you were to count, would you ever count with negative numbers? No, not if we're counting. If we're counting, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, right? We're not going to say, I'm going to count by -1, -2, -3, -4. No, if I threw a disc up and I were counting, I'm going to go from 0 and go on up. So the only answer that would really work for this one would be this one right here. And it's, okay, that was terrible. I mean, I didn't realize I had the highlighter on. So it's this one right there. So between 3 and 4, and you would label it seconds. Okay, so it does, if you don't have that 0 in your y-axis, if it's not a 0 where your y is, then you're going to have to take your legs and pull them down to wherever it would be about. And if it's a word problem, it's always going to be the positive of the numbers, okay? Because we're not going to have negative. So if they're talking about time, you would never have negative time, okay? But if this were just in one of your other ones where it wasn't a word problem, it was just the x and the y, and then you have to graph it, then you would use both those answers, between -1 and -2, and between 3 and 4. Okay, I'm hoping that this is making sense to you. I'll be available via Schoology if you want to, if you have questions on this. Otherwise, please, please, please give it a whirl. I'd hate for us to be stuck with having so many kids that we have to catch up tomorrow that did not do the assignment today. So please go ahead and give that assignment a whirl. If you have questions, send me a Schoology message and I will get back to you. All right, thanks a lot.